Salutations and welcome. I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis, and this is Amalfi Sports. And in this episode, we are recapping the 153rd Belmont Stakes. But before we do, I just want to say a big thank you to all of those who tuned in and checked out my Belmont preview. It was our best YouTube video yet for Amalfi Media. We picked up a lot of new subscribers, so thank you for all of the likes and the comments. If you enjoy the content today, make sure to press that like button, subscribe to Amalfi Media, and leave a comment about what horse racing you're looking forward to seeing over the summer. But you might have noticed if you subscribe to Amalfi Media, we have a lot more than just sports coverage. We also have podcasts that we post on YouTube that cover topics from history to politics to cooking shows to finances to pop culture. So we have a little something for everyone. So I encourage you to subscribe to Amalfi Media, get a lot of great content. We're putting out new content just about every single day, and Amalfi Sports is obviously a big part of that. Now, I was going to just come back in November, as I mentioned when I signed off for the Belmont preview, that I was going to come back for the Breeders' Cup in November. But there was such an outpouring of support for the video, and so many people seemed to like it, that I decided I would do a recap of the Belmont. And then I'm also going to talk to you about some other races that I'm planning on doing previews for throughout the summer. So stay tuned to the very end to hear about those upcoming preview opportunities. But let's get to the race from Saturday, the 153rd Belmont Stakes, and what a race it was. And there was some big news that happened right before the race, actually, in the days before the race. And that was, of course, the injury to Irad Ortiz Jr., the jockey who is slated to ride on Known Agenda. Irad Ortiz Jr. was thrown from his horse on Thursday afternoon and was clipped in the back of the head by another horse in that race. Thankfully, medics did a great job getting to him quickly, getting him to the hospital. He recovered, is doing just fine. He was actually recovering at home. His brother, Jose Ortiz, took Irad Ortiz Jr.'s place on Known Agenda during the Belmont Stakes, and actually took several of Irad Ortiz Jr.'s rides throughout the day at the Belmont. And won several of them. Wasn't able to pull off the victory for Known Agenda, and we'll get to that in a second. But that was some of the news leading up to the race. But then once the race itself happened, man, what a race it was. And I think the defining feature of this race was pace. It was a fast pace. That Hot Rod Charlie got out there really fast and ran the fastest first quarter of a mile in the history of the Belmont Stakes. Now, I just said, this is the 153rd Belmont Stakes. What you witnessed on Saturday was the fastest first quarter of a mile by a horse ever in the Belmont Stakes. So incredible speed by Hot Rod Charlie. Now, why did he go out so fast? It wasn't as if he just broke loose and was just running fast for the heck of it. Obviously, you want to get that inside position. You want to get that lead position. Some horses just do better from the lead. Certainly, Hot Rod Charlie is one of those. But what really pushed the pace was the fact that you had three horses going for the lead. Whenever that happens, it's just going to push the pace that much faster. If you only have two, what happens is a lot of times one of those horses will kind of sit down either right inside or right outside of the lead horse. And so it won't necessarily lead to this breakneck pace that they'll kind of go, okay, they'll kind of concede the lead and go, okay, I'll kind of stay half a length behind you in second or a neck behind you in second and kind of go around that way. When you have three, nobody wants to get pushed out too wide. And so you have a lot more jockeying and you push those horses a lot harder, a lot faster, and a lot longer than you might otherwise. So it led to a very fast early pace from Hot Rod Charlie, who amazingly was actually able to maintain that for just about the entire way before finally getting eclipsed by the eventual winner and betting line favorite Essential Quality, who ended up winning the 153rd Belmont Stakes in a very impressive fashion. Really a great race from Essential Quality, who did not get caught up in that early speed, sat back in that second group. If you watch the race live, you notice that really all of the horses were bunched pretty closely together. This was not the Kentucky Derby where you see this, really long gap of horses, just because of the sheer number of horses in the field. With only 8 horses in the field, much more compact, going around the first and second turns, down the backstretch, even going into turns 3 and 4. Really, all the course horses were still very closely bunched together. Essential Quality then made a move, got up to Hot Rod Charlie. The two of them pulled away from the rest of the field. And I have to be honest, as a horse racing fanatic, one of the images that I had was of Affirmed and Aladar. Those great horse racing from back in the 70s. Affirmed always just eked out Aladar in all the Triple Crown races. But they were always neck and neck coming down the stretch. And that's really what we saw from Essential Quality and Hot Rod Charlie. The two of them separating themselves from the rest of the field and really in dominating fashion. Great time on the race. It was just a wonderful performance from both horses. The fact that Hot Rod Charlie was able to go out so fast and to still finish so strong on a 1.5 mile track was incredibly impressive. That was probably as good of a second place finish as I've seen in recent years. Now, as I mentioned, the winning horse, Essential Quality, was going off as the betting line favorite. Second place, Hot Rod Charlie. Third place, Rombauer. Fourth place, Known Agenda. Fifth place, Bourbonic. Sixth place, Rock Your World. Seventh went to Overtook. And finally, in eighth place was France Godeina. Now, as you can see from the betting graphic that we have up here, the official time was 2:27:11. That is the 11th fastest time for the Belmont Stakes when it's run at 1.5 miles. Belmont is not always run at 1.5 miles. In fact, it wasn't run at 1.5 miles just last year. Because of COVID, it was only run at 1.125 miles. But at the 1.5 mile mark, this is the 11th fastest time. So they were really moving. And just to put it into recent historical perspective, American Pharaoh, who won the Triple Crown, ran about a half second faster than this. But Justified, who won the Triple Crown 3 years ago, ran a full second slower than this. So this was a very, very strong pace from Hot Rod Charlie and the eventual winner, Essential Quality. You can see the payoffs there for Essential Quality, Hot Rod Charlie, and then third place finisher Rombauer. Your exacta, trifecta, superfecta bets, not going to hit huge on any of these. None of these horses were going off at huge odds. Essential Quality at 2-1, Hot Rod Charlie at 7-2, Rombauer at about 6-1. So all of these horses were going off at a pretty good price. So you're not going to hit a huge number on any of these. Although, listen, if you hit that $1 superfecta, hats off to you for winning $60.70 today. But that was the kind of betting rundown from the race. And really, like I said, an impressive race. When looking at that pace that was set by Hot Rod Charlie and how it all ended up playing out. Now, if you watch the preview, you know that I was really high on Known Agenda. I thought Known Agenda had an okay race. I thought the early speed actually benefited Known Agenda. What I didn't expect was for Hot Rod Charlie to hold up so well all the way throughout. I was expecting some horses to fatigue a little bit more. I also thought Jose Ortiz might have moved Known Agenda a little early, started to make that initial move about halfway through 3 and 4, and was pushing Known Agenda. Although I don't think it would have made a difference. I think even if he had waited until he was, at about the quarter pole, I still think ultimately Essential Quality wins, because I think by that point it would have been too late. And Known Agenda is not known for having that extra gear necessarily, as much as it's just a fast cruising speed. So ultimately didn't quite pan out. Bourbonic, who I mentioned, was kind of, I thought, a live long shot, certainly did the best out of all of the long shots. But in an 8-horse race, you just don't really have any long shots. I mean, even France Godeina was going off under 20-1. I mean, France Godeina had no business being in this race, in my opinion. And so, the fact that it was going off, I think, at 18-1, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's a horse that's about a 30-1 horse, in my opinion, or a 35-1 horse. So, like I said, a smaller race, you just don't have as much money to spread around, or you spread that money around to more horses, and so all of those odds kind of get dropped down. Tougher to find value picks. But that said, I was really high on Hot Rod Charlie, and man, I thought he ran just a phenomenal race. So great effort by him, and of course, an amazing effort by Essential Quality, who we should point out was undefeated going into the Kentucky Derby, had a rough Derby, finished 4th though, skipped the Preakness, came back in the Belmont, and got right back on his winning ways. So this is an incredibly impressive horse now, 6 wins and 7 outings. That really should say it all. The other thing this really demonstrates is one of the flaws of the Triple Crown is that the way that horses are bred now, you just don't run horses on 2 weeks rest and then again on 3 weeks rest. And so I don't think it's a surprise that the horse that finished first and second were both horses that skipped the Preakness and had a 5-week layoff between the Derby and the Belmont. That's much more in line with how many of these horses are trained. And so to see that longer layoff and these horses benefit from that is not surprising. It's part of the reason why a Triple Crown is so difficult to achieve, because you do have horses that will skip that second leg oftentimes in the Triple Crown and then come back much fresher for the Belmont, as opposed to the horses that ran in all three in the first 2 legs before getting to the Belmont. So I think you're seeing a lot of tactical decisions being made. If you watch the broadcast in real time, they talked about this a little bit as well, that there was in recent years a trend towards horses that skip the Preakness that actually end up performing quite well at the Belmont. In the past, you've seen kind of horses that just come in for the Belmont that are kind of specifically a 1.5 mile type of horse. You don't see that quite as much anymore, but that is still something to keep in mind. So all of that being said, this was an amazing race. The other thing to mention is really the connections make a huge difference. So and when I say connections, I'm not just referring to the jockey and the trainer, but to the sire and the pedigree of the horse. Pedigree makes a huge difference. So this is the 4th win in the last 8 years for a horse that was sired by Tapit. That is incredibly impressive. So that is why, if you've listened to my other previews before, you've heard me mention the pedigree of horses to say this matters and this doesn't, or this is an impressive pedigree and this is maybe a less impressive pedigree. The fact that you've seen the 4 of the last 8 Belmont Stakes winners being sired by the same horse tells you that this is a strong pedigree for being able to go 1.5 miles. So that's something to keep in mind for the 154th Belmont Stakes next year. You might want to look, is there a horse sired by Tapit? If so, I don't care what the odds are. I'm putting at least $2 on that horse to win, if nothing else, just to see what happens. So that is, I think, one of the other takeaways from all of this. And of course, great, really feel great about the connections for Essential Quality. Brad Cox Jr., great trainer. Louis Saez, wonderful jockey. So feeling happy for both of them today, and a wonderful performance all around. Now, that's what happened at the 153rd Belmont, but there was some other news that affected horse racing from earlier in the week, and that was, of course, the second sample coming back positive for beta-methasone for Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit. As I mentioned, this is the second positive test. This test actually showed higher levels of beta-methasone, 25 picograms as opposed to the 21 picograms it initially showed. This information was released by Bob Baffert's attorney. Whenever the guilty trainer's attorney is releasing news of a positive test, that probably is not a great look and probably not great news for Bob Baffert. I mean, there is, if you read the entire press release, the attorney mentions that, it wasn't tested for the interactions with other substances that was used on Medina Spirit's leg. All of that being said, it does seem as if it's just going to be a matter of time before Medina Spirit is officially disqualified from the Kentucky Derby. And that means that Mandaloun would be your 2021 Kentucky Derby winner. And that means that Brad Cox Jr., who just won the Belmont with Essential Quality, would have won the Kentucky Derby as well, because he trained Mandaloun. And Mandaloun, that's an amazing story as well, because that's a horse that was going off at 26-1, was a real long shot going into the Derby. So, great job by those connections. Obviously, you want to win those races outright. Winning by disqualification is less than ideal, and certainly is a little bit of a black eye for the sport. But congratulations to Brad Cox Jr., who could end up winning 2 legs of the Triple Crown this year with 2 different horses in a matter of a week. So like I said, good job by him training those horses and doing it the right way. The other big news that came out was that Bob Baffert is banned from Churchill Downs for the next 2 years. That is huge news. This is someone whose image, whose face, whose figure is so connected to horse racing in the eyes of the public and the mind of the public that not seeing that snow white hair, those blue tinted glasses, the first weekend in May is really going to be a shock to the system, I think, for a lot of casual horse racing fans, and certainly a storyline that is going to come up again next year and the year after that when he's not there. So his absence is going to speak volumes and is going to leave quite a void. And again, a little bit of a black eye for the sport. But I want to finish on a positive note. And if you watched the broadcast on Saturday on NBC, you heard Randy Moss, who I like a lot and I agree with on most things, say that this was a bad last 5 weeks for horse racing. And I understand why he said that. And I don't disagree with him entirely. But I actually think there are a lot of positives that came out of this last 5 weeks. I think, first of all, a lot of great new trainers have been exposed to the public. I think Brad Cox Jr., first and foremost among those. Chad Brown, who I've talked about before on this podcast many times, or in this video many times, in terms of entering all of these horses, not winning, but getting out there in the public eye. Obviously much more successful in turf, but entered a slew of horses at the Derby as well, had a couple at the Preakness. So Chad Brown, Michael McCarthy, the protege of Todd Pletcher, who ended up winning the Preakness with Rombauer, another name that people have gotten exposed to over the last couple of weeks. So that's good. It's great to see new young blood getting into the game. As much as I like Todd Pletcher, as big of a shadow as Bob Baffert has, for years it was D. Wayne Lucas. I mean, you have these figures who are almost larger than life in horse racing. They can cast quite a large shadow, but it's great to see younger trainers, younger jockeys come up, get noticed, and get respected. Speaking of younger jockeys, Flavion Pratt, who won on Rombauer and who finished in second on Hot Rod Charlie, great last couple of weeks for him, and Luis Saez, who you have to feel great for after winning on Saturday on Essential Quality. This is a guy who won the Kentucky Derby on maximum security in 2019, only later to get disqualified because of interference. That was a really controversial call. I understand why it was made. He moved out a little wide in an unnatural way and ended up bumping into some horses that did legitimately cause interference. So again, I understand why they made the decision they did, but that was heartbreaking for Luis Saez. And to see him come back and win the Belmont the way he did today, you have to feel good for him. The other thing I'll say is, I think this is good for horse racing in terms of not having a Triple Crown winner, because it means all of the connections associated with these horses are going to keep running these horses. And that's something that in recent years I've been disappointed by, and I understand why it's happened. But so oftentimes you see horses win the first two legs of the Triple Crown or win the Triple Crown itself, and after the Belmont, they don't run anymore. That the trainers, the owners have said, listen, this horse is going to, the stud fees and the siring fees are astronomical, and they want to strike while the iron's hot. And I get it. You're in this horse racing, and owning horses and training horses is an expensive business. And when you have the opportunity to make all of that money on stud fees, you certainly, I don't begrudge anyone for striking while the iron's hot. But what it often does, it deprives us from seeing these wonderful horses run for the duration of their 3-year-old year and potentially even into their 4-year-old year. Now, like I said, that doesn't happen all the time, but more times than not, you do see those great horses get put out to the field to stud for the rest of their lives, and you don't get to see them on the track quite as much. But I think we're going to see a lot of Essential Quality. We're going to see a lot of Hot Rod Charlie and Rombauer and Known Agenda. And we're probably going to see Midnight Bourbon come back. And we're going to see horses even like Medina Spirit come back. So we're going to see these horses that have grabbed attention and grabbed headlines continue to race throughout their 3-year-old year leading up to the Breeders' Cup in November. I think that's wonderful for the sport. I think it's great when you can start to follow a horse when they're 2 years old, follow their career into the run for the Triple Crown. And then after that post-Triple Crown career for the Breeders' Cup, going into their 4-year-old year, some of these horses might move on to turf and move into kind of a different kind of category of racing to some extent, but it's going to be great to follow those along. I know I'm excited. I have a couple of favorites. Yeah, I've been going down with the ship on Known Agenda, so I'm eager to follow his career. I also really like Midnight Bourbon, so I'm interested to follow his career as well. But like I said, we're going to follow Essential Quality, Hot Rod Charlie, Ron Bauer. We're going to follow these horses all the way to the Breeders' Cup in November. So, all of that being said, the summer has so much more to offer. As I mentioned at the very top, I was just going to do another preview in November for the Breeders' Cup, but I figured, listen, I'm watching horse racing this whole time. I follow horse racing on a daily basis, so I might as well make some more previews because I'm going to be following a lot more races throughout the summer. And of course, among the top of those are going to be the races that are going to be run at Saratoga. I'll have previews for all of those: the Diana, the Travers, and the Whitney Handicap. Saratoga is one of my favorite racetracks. Beautiful, beautiful track, wonderful environment. Just to go in there, to sit at the picnic tables, to sit under the giant shade trees, and then to run in right before the race starts to see the track. It's really a very special place. If you've not had an opportunity to travel to Saratoga, do so. I'm excited. I'm going to try to maybe make it up there for the Whitney. To see my good friend Anders Matson and his family. They're always gracious hosts for me up there in Saratoga. So if you happen to be up there at Saratoga, feel free to try to reach out, let me know, and I'd love to meet you, and we can talk some horse racing. But aside from just the Saratoga races, I'll also be doing a preview for the Haskell Stakes, as well as the American Pharoah Stakes, which is in September for the 2-year-olds. That's right. Get a jump on next year's Triple Crown by following some of these horses as 2-year-olds. The American Pharoah Stakes is a great opportunity to do that. And so that'll be a really exciting race in September. And then I live in Northern Virginia, so I'm going to make my way down to Colonial Downs. They don't necessarily have the highest caliber of racing there, but I might just do a couple of Colonial Down previews as well, or maybe even do a preview from the racetrack when I go down to visit on opening day in July. So a lot of fun things. And then, of course, we will have the Breeders' Cup preview up in November. So listen, I hope you've all had a wonderful Triple Crown stretch. I hope you've enjoyed your Black-Eyed Susans, your Mint Juleps, your Belmont Breezes. I hope you've enjoyed my old Kentucky home, and Maryland, my Maryland, and New York, New York. And I just hope you've enjoyed the environment and the ambiance of the Triple Crown, and come back for all of these great races that are going to continue to happen throughout the summer and fall. So as I mentioned, make sure to like this video, leave a comment for what you're most looking forward to in the summer racing schedule, and subscribe to Amalfi Media to get all of the great content. We have so much more aside just from horse racing. We cover men's golf, we cover the NFL, we cover baseball, basketball. We got you covered on sports, but we also have great stuff on history, politics, cooking, finance, pop culture. We really do have it all. So hope you enjoy what we have to offer at Amalfi Media. And until next time, I'm Matthew DeSantis, and it's now post time.